We are counting down to Korea's upcoming match against Ghana, scheduled for later on this Monday. So what is the outlook with regard to Korea's match against Ghana? And what about the outlook regarding Korea's match against Portugal on Friday? Will Korea advance to the next round? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today we address Team Korea's performance and prospects for the 2022 World Cup. For more on that, I have Yoo Jee-ho over in Qatar joining us live. Joo, it's great to have you on.
Oh, it's great to be here too.
I also have Jack Barton joining us live as well on the line. Jack, as always, it's a pleasure.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure to be on the show.
Thank you. Now, Gio, before we get on to today's action, upcoming action that is, let's begin with a few words on Team Korea's opening match against Uruguay last Thursday that ended in a draw. Pundits here say it was a battle well fought by the Taegeuk Warriors. What do you say?
Well, I think it was indeed a very strong effort for Team Korea. And the players said after the match that they weren't just happy with the 1 point, the draw. They were disappointed not to have won the match. A lot of them said they thought they deserved to win that one, and they think they let one get away a little bit from them. So, I think they walked away from that match with a lot of confidence going into the second match against Ghana. But you know what? I think on the other hand, they've got to be a little better with their finish. They've got to be more precise, more clinical in the opposition box. They've got to be able to convert their chances. They didn't have a lot against Uruguay, but in a World Cup match, typically against very strong teams, you're not going to have a lot of chances. So when you do get your chance, you have to be able to convert and score. The Korean players were not able to do that against Uruguay. Hopefully they will be able to do a few more of those against Ghana later tonight.
Right, hopefully, and I have my fingers crossed as well. Meanwhile, Jack, here in Korea, football fans gathered at stadiums and squares to support Team Korea last week, that was, and they will do so today as well, hopefully if it doesn't rain too much, of course. Now, that being said, would you say, Jack, that there's been a greater or heightened awareness about crowd safety amid these public gatherings?
Absolutely, and I'm sure they'll come out in big numbers, even if it's pouring with rain later on. We saw at the main viewing area, the fan zone in Gwanghwamun, which back in 2018, when Russia was hosting the game, was just one big area, one screen. People could come and gather. And, there was crowd control there because it was an organized event, but nothing like we have seen this year. With that area now 3 big screens, so it's more dispersed. Broken up into 5 different areas, so resembling more of a rock concert. More than 500 police officers, fire engines on scene, ambulances on scene, hundreds of other private crowd control operators in the area, and everybody sort of ferried in. Some people trying to stop and watch the game as they came through the corral, and everyone saying, move on, keeping the crowds moving, and the same as they went out. Now, of course, it's only a quarter of the number of people that were in Itaewon for the Halloween gatherings, and that was a particular set of circumstances funneled through the narrow alleys. So some could argue, well, it might not have been needed, but everybody is still very rattled by the tragedy of Halloween. And everybody I spoke to who was down there or saw what was happening said they felt reassured. They didn't feel like it was an overreaction. They felt like it was an appropriate response, given what had happened, to allow everybody to come back out and enjoy this in a fun, relaxed atmosphere where even children could come down and feel safe.
You're right. So true, Jack. So true. And hopefully that will be the case today as well. Now, Gio, later today, Team Korea, as we said earlier, plays Ghana. First then, what can you tell us about this African team?
Ghana lost to Portugal 3-2 to begin their World Cup last week, the same day that Korea had a draw with Uruguay. And Korean players were able to watch that match, or at least the highlights of it, some of them. And they came away with the impression that this Ghana team can be exploited on the defensive end. If you recall the Portugal match, Ghana started out very cautiously in the first half, kind of locking things down defensively. And then things opened up a little bit in the second half. All 5 goals in that match were scored in the last half an hour or so when Ghana tried to, kind of go after them a little bit, and they left themselves kind of vulnerable defensively. And Korean players identify those issues, and they believe they will be able to exploit some of the space behind Ghana's defense. I think it's going to be there's going to be a little more reaction, I would think, than what we saw against Uruguay. Ghana is going to play a little more open, because they need a win too, just as much as Korea needs to win. Ghana did not get a point in the first match, so they're going to be out there trying to score, trying to win this match. So I expect a little more fireworks between these two teams later tonight.
Right, I expect it's going to be a make or break game for both teams then. And that being said, Jack, and keeping in mind, of course, what you has just said about Team Ghana, what are your personal thoughts regarding Korea's prospects against Ghana, Jack?
I think it could be very close. If we look at the 6 international matches they've played in the past, all friendlies, it's been 3 wins for each team. At the moment, they may have some weaknesses in defence, but Korea has some weaknesses in attack with Hwan Hee-chan's hamstring injury and, of course, Captain Son Heung-min's facial injury, the fracture around his left eye. So that means it's going to be tough again on the offence for the Korean team. And also Ghana has what they consider to be a deeper team in terms of the players coming from right across the leagues in Europe and the Premier League. So, you look at some analysts and they say Korea could just take this or Ghana could just take it, or there's an equal number that say it could be a draw. But the one thing I've seen in this World Cup so far is to expect the unexpected. That began with Saudi Arabia and Argentina. And then we saw it again with Belgium and Morocco. We just keep seeing these complete upsets. We keep seeing results that in no way align with expectations or what should happen. So I spoke to some amateur football players on the pitch the other day, and they said when Korea is in a corner, that's when we play best. Think of 2002. With that in mind, I think Korea still has a very good chance.
Right, and on that optimistic tone, Gio, what can you tell us about Team Korea's prospects with regard to its upcoming game against Portugal this coming Friday?
At least based on FIFA rankings, Portugal, they're number 9, the highest among the all Group H teams, and they should be the favorites going into Friday's match. I guess it all kind of depends on how Portugal does against Uruguay also later Monday. But yeah, they're still a strong team. Cristiano Ronaldo, still a very dangerous player. Maybe he's not the explosive player that he was maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, but he's gotten a little smarter, I would think, as far as drawing fouls from defenders. I think we saw that against Ghana, kind of questionable maybe penalty, depending on your perspective there. So he's a very smart player, still very dangerous, someone to keep an eye on. But also kind of similar with Ghana, might have some defensive issues on the back. So Korea should also try to exploit that a little bit. But there's a danger of kind of looking past your immediate opponent. So if you ask any Korean player or anybody in the coaching staff, they're probably not going to answer anything about Portugal. Right now they're concentrating on Ghana, trying to win that match, and then, after this match is done, then they're going to start thinking about Portugal. But yeah, I think this is still the team to beat in Group H. Right now in first place, and still the favorites to win this group going forward.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, beyond the field, Jack, Qatar's World Cup is said to be the most extravagant affair, and organisers there believe the event will provide Qatar with essential publicity for productive growth. How do you respond?
I think it's been a little bit of a public relations disaster for Qatar, to be completely honest, in the lead up, in the way they secured it. A lot of controversy there involving FIFA. The fact that they had to shift it to this time of year. It's supposed to be in summer, but of course it's too hot in Qatar, which really doesn't have a history of football. And then the issue of the workers, the immigrant workers who built all the infrastructure, the appalling number of deaths and the conditions they've been subjected to, with reporters going out to the camps where they live and just showing shocking conditions that they live in. Then there's the LGBTQ issue, the suppression of players trying to wear the armbands in support of that community. But of course, we've seen this in the past, like with Russia. We have all of this controversy before, and then when the cup begins, everyone focuses on the football. And it has sort of worked out like that, but the controversy has dragged on. But then it's just all these other sort of geopolitical issues feeding in, like the Iranian team initially not singing the national anthem and sticking up for the players. sticking up for the demonstrators back home. We've seen the incredible riots in the news today back in Belgium after the game, and even what's happening in China. We saw so many reports of people in China watching the game as they live under zero COVID and going, hey, what's going on? And even though the protest there was sparked by a fire in Urumqi, probably a lot of that is feeding into that as well. So, that has shifted a lot of the focus away from some of the things in Qatar. But this is an extraordinary World Cup in many ways, whereas the actual games still haven't managed to get traction over all of the other news that's being generated out of the World Cup. And that's highly unusual because normally at this point, it's just about the football and nothing else.
Right. And talking about the football then, Gio, I'm sure you've been speaking with Korean fans there in Qatar. How are they enjoying the experience of being able to watch the games live, like yourself?
Yeah, I was able to see a few fans just before the Uruguay match last week. And, some of them have traveled from Korea. Some of them are actually living in Qatar or some other Gulf nations. And some of the fans who come from Korea, I asked them, how do you spend the days between Korean matches? And they said they would either attend other teams' matches if they do have tickets, or they would actually fly out to Dubai to spend a few days there and then come back to Doha in time for the Korean matches. There's a ban on alcoholic beverages in this country. You can only get beers and other alcohol in designated areas. And of course, FIFA made a decision just, I think, 2 days before the opening match to ban sales of alcohol in stadiums. So, I guess although beverages and football kind of go hand in hand, and for fans who want to be able to enjoy a few responsibly anyway, I think they would choose to fly to maybe some other spots around Qatar in between Korean matches and then fly back here to cheer on the national team.
Right, well, beer is allowed here in South Korea. And that being said, Jack, how is the expat community here indulging in the football fever?
They're indulging in it pretty much the same way the Koreans here are indulging in it any way they can. Everybody I know in the expat community, of course, is tuning into the games, even if that leaves them a little bit sleepless. Everybody having to watch it at home or go down to the fan zone in Gwanghwamun because many of the private places are just booked out. I spoke to the owner of one soccer bar here, and he said they've been booked out 3 months ahead of the World Cup. So if you didn't reserve 3 months ago, you can't come in and watch it in the in any of the clubs. So, extraordinary high demand. Everybody very excited. I'm following the other Red Devils, the Belgian squad. I know that seems a bit unpatriotic given that I'm Australian, but I used to live there and knew some of the players. So, tuned in last night and was a little bit disappointed when they were beaten by Morocco, but thrilled for Morocco, their first win in 22 years. So an incredible achievement for that team. And I'm a little bit sleepless today sitting up. And I'm sure most of the expat community is going to look a little bit similar, a little baggy under the eyes until this cup wraps up. But it is good. I mean, especially after 2 years of pandemic, we are having more and more of these events. But it's just great to get into a World Cup again where everybody can go out, as you say, have a beer, mask off outdoors, and just really enjoy yourself again in the countries, of course, like Korea, where you still can go out and do that. So, yeah, a wonderful experience, and hoping it stays that way till the end of the Cup.
Right, hopefully. And finally, Joe, one very quick question before you go. I know it's too early to tell, but based on what you've been witnessing on the ground thus far, what are Korea's chances of advancing into the next round?
Well, it is too early. Just one match in the books for Korea, but I think there's a very strong chance. This group is wide open. With Portugal being the only team to have collected 3 points so far. So I think Ghana is there to be taken. If Korea can take care of business tonight, they're going to improve to 4 points going into the last one. I think there's a pretty good shot that Korea can actually progress to the round of 16.
Right, hopefully that will be the case. All right, Gio, thank you so much for joining us live from Qatar. And Jack, as always, thank you very much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Right, well, on that note, we end this edition of Issues and Insiders. And may the best men win today's match. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.